So today I want to take a minute and talk about ska and my sort of history with ska, how I loved ska, fell away, came back, and have learned to love ska in a whole new different way. Now, so one of my favorite authors ever is this guy named Donald Miller, and Donald Miller has a part in one of his books where he talks about the fact that everybody needs to leave home so that they can fall in love with home, so they can eventually come back home and fall in love with it for different reasons. And, being someone from Texas and someone that grew up into punk and ska, the idea of moving away from Texas always really resonated with me. I was eager to get away from this state. I just felt like a lot of the ideals of Texas didn't line up with me. The furthest I ever moved from my home in Dallas-Fort Worth was San Antonio, which is the wrong way if you're trying to get away from Texas. And I moved back a year later because I missed here so much, primarily missed my family and friends. But I have come to love Texas for different reasons, and I'm a proud Texan, now. But that idea of moving away and coming back and falling in love for different reasons, it doesn't just resonate with actual home, but it also resonates with things in your life. There's sort of seasons in your life where you need to move away from something, but when you come back to it, you love it for different reasons. So for me, I think about that in the context of ska. So me being the Rudie Librarian, you might think that I've been diehard ska fan my whole life, and maybe because I haven't, I don't deserve to wear the title of the Rudie Librarian. But I'll put it this way. For me, I grew up listening primarily to Christian rock. There was a big Christian rock scene in the 90s and 2000s. That was brought about by labels like Tooth and Nail and the subsidiaries of Tooth and Nail, BEC, Solid State, Plastic Music, Up Rock Records. There were 5 Minute Walk Records, Forefront, Goatee Records. And those were the albums, those were the labels that I was listening to a lot of different kinds of bands. I've talked about in a previous video how I was introduced to a lot of the Tooth and Nail bands through a neighbor of my youth pastor who would give a bunch of music to my youth pastor who would then give it to me. And that's absolutely true. Now, the music I was most drawn to initially especially was punk and ska. I loved punk and ska, but if you were in the Christian scene, and I think if you lived in the 90s, punk and ska really kind of, you talked about them in the same breath a lot of time because ska was so predominant for a few years there. So if you were in the Christian scene, though, there were really only 3 ska bands that existed. And those were the Supertones, the OC Supertones, Five Iron Frenzy, and the Insiders. And they were all, in many ways, significantly different from one another. The OC Supertones was sort of the most vocal about faith and faith challenges, I think. It was also, the lead singer was doing a lot of hip-hop over ska, which was something different. And I think for some people maybe opened up the door to like hip-hop a little bit more. But there were also these really soulful singing kind of songs. But it was a fun band, and especially the first 2 albums, Adventures of the OC Supertones and Supertone Strike Back, those were deeply loved. So I grew up listening to them. Five Iron Frenzy was the band that was a lot more funny. They were joking around. They had silly songs, but they also had some of the most intensely challenging songs with songs like, Fahrenheit, right? So they have a song about how they reacted to finding out Freddie Mercury's sexuality, and then and it being sort of a really bad reaction due to their faith, and then after Freddie Mercury dying, just feeling the guilt and conviction of their previously held beliefs. That was really challenging, I think, in a lot of ways. So they would have these deeply challenging songs and say things that maybe a lot of the Christian community didn't like, but they also had these worshipful songs like Dandelions, and then they had silly songs like Sucker Punch. And then there was the Insiders, which were vocally much gruffer, Detroit ska. The lead singer had a little growl in his voice. The first album I heard by them, Fight of My Life, was a little more hard edged than the other 2 bands. And then they ended up becoming more known for doing albums of worship covers that were ska. And they were all, different, and I enjoyed them all quite a bit. But that was really what you had for ska. There was a compilation album called Skanktified that had 20-something or 30-something different Christian ska bands, but most of them never really broke out. There was a band called Bunch of Believers that got real popular because they had a song called Mission Trip to Mexico. There was a band called Flight 180. But that's about what you had. I had a friend who had a lot of stickers on the back of their car that were things like, that were bands I didn't really know, like the Hippos and Goldfinger and that kind of stuff. And I thought he was the coolest guy. His name was Clark. I thought he was the coolest guy. I wished I had more knowledge of all those bands that he knew. But then I had, a lot of love for punk. I was really into punk a little more than ska, probably. So I really enjoyed those albums, but it kind of, over time just, faded to the background of my life. And it wasn't really until a couple of years ago, I think it's, probably less than 2 years ago now, that Pick It Up came out. And if you've never seen Pick It Up is a documentary about ska in the 90s, specifically third wave ska. It does teach the history of the first and second wave of ska, but then it goes into third wave ska, and it talks about that. And there's literally hundreds of bands, it feels like, that are mentioned in this documentary. Bands that I grew up listening to on the punk scene, like Blink-182 and MXPX, are referenced as well. But there's a lot of bands I had heard of, but maybe not heard. And leading into that documentary, I was already starting to remember how much I love ska. So that documentary came out, and I remember asking my friends, post the song or video of your favorite ska band, and I had hundreds of responses. All these people that grew up loving ska and really hadn't talked about it in a while, I guess. And so I put all these songs into a playlist, and I got to know and fall in love with a ton of ska bands. Many of them were from back in the 90s that I just really didn't listen to back then. And man, I was so happy to get the opportunity to get to know these bands, bands like Mustard Plug and the Toasters and the Suicide Machines, and really getting to listen to Heads Will Roll by the Hippos, and gosh, there's literally so many more. Edna's Goldfish. But not only that, but I had some friends that introduced me to some newer bands, and as I started sort of connecting in social media through ska, I found all these new bands. So one of the reasons I wanted to make this video today is I wanted to talk about how if you are not familiar with ska, even though ska seems to have been really only like a moment in time, first of all, a lot of those bands still made music after the ska boom was over. But second of all, there is a whole new wave of ska that is so good. So there's argument about whether it should be called a fourth wave or not, and I think that the primary thing there is that stylistically, it's not a whole lot different than the third wave, so it should still be considered part of the third wave, but I'll leave that up to better minds than mine. But, there's so many great new bands that you can connect with. There's back in the day, a lot of the ska music was coming from Asian Man Records. They're still putting out some great stuff. There's also a great record label called Bad Time Records now, and everything Bad Time Records is putting out is pretty phenomenal. There's such a wide variety of ska bands. There's ska bands such as Half Past Two, whom I love very much, and Catbite, and I have to shout out my friends in the Backyard Superheroes. There's literally hundreds of new ska bands. Bands like Millington, Kill Lincoln, Call Me Malcolm, just so much good stuff. If you ever get a chance on YouTube to watch Electric Gremlin. So ska now, so let me back up and talk about how I came to be the Rudie Librarian. So about the time that I was re-falling in love with ska, a friend of mine's mother passed away. And I think that a lot of people, that knew me back when I was a kid, knew me as kind of a goofball, maybe a pain in the tail. I decided when I went to her funeral to dress how I would have in the 90s, sort of, I thought that she would have laughed at it, my friend's mom. So I showed up in my black slacks, white shirt, checkerboard suspenders and tie, and a black sort of taxi driver cap, and sunglasses that were black and white checkered that I'd gotten from the ska movie when I ordered sort of the big bundle. And her daughter, who has been one of my close friends since I was in 8th grade, told me that she loved it and that she thinks her mom would have loved it. But there was something that felt good about getting back in those clothes. It was like I was opening up a part of myself that I'd shut down, and I was like, man, I need to embrace all of me again. And so I dove back into punk and ska pretty aggressively. And what I found was that the ska community is one of the most loving places, the most supportive places. People like Ska Box, Ska Punk Daily, Ska Parade, On the Upbeat, 23 Minutes of Ska. These are podcasts, radio stations, subscription boxes that are foundational to the ska scene right now. And man, they welcomed me with open arms. They introduced me to some of the best bands that exist out there. And they brought a lot of joy back in my life, which I needed kind of going into quarantine. So that's sort of my story with ska. It's I want to highlight there's so many good older ska bands that are putting out new music. Goldfinger's got a great new album out that is so good. The Long Beach Dub All-Stars, who have been going for a long time, they had a great album last year. The Aquabats had a great album this last year. So many great things. And you see things like Gwen Stefani trying to, sort of make her way back to those roots a little bit. But there's also so much great ska out there right now, like Ska Tune Network, and We Are the Union, and Jer, and all of those have one guy in them. He's in all three of those bands. There's just so much good ska out there for you to connect with. So I want to encourage you to fall, if you're my age, fall back in love with ska. Your old bands are making new music, and it's awesome. But whether you're my age or not, fall in love with the new ska. There's so much great ska out there right now. You need to go and pick it up.